Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. When hardware engineers test a new piece of technology, like, say, a flagship smartphone or a rugged laptop, they don't just gently place the device on some soft velvet pillow in a climate-controlled room.
Oh, definitely not. I mean, they do the exact opposite of that.
Right. It's like they actively try to destroy the thing.
Yeah, the standard protocol is brutal. They drop it onto solid concrete from 6 feet in the air, or they freeze it in blocks of ice. They blast it with high pressure water and tumble it in these massive dust chambers.
Which makes sense because the physical world isn't a velvet pillow. That phone is absolutely going to get dropped out of a moving car at some point.
Or knocked off a kitchen counter into a sink full of soapy water. The physical engineering just inherently assumes a chaotic, hostile environment.
Exactly. And here is the massive disconnect we are tearing down today. When we design the software inside those very same devices, we completely abandon that logic.
We really do. We go right back to designing for the velvet pillow.
We pretend the digital world operates in this pristine vacuum. And our mission today is to completely reframe how you think about digital design based on a really fascinating recent article.
Yeah, this piece was published on January 21st, 2026 by Tobias Reidenhag. He's the head of design at Intunio, which is a UX design and development studio over in Gothenburg, Sweden.
And the article is titled, Why Accessibility Improves Usability for Everyone. And, we usually think of accessibility as this totally parallel track, right? Like a special feature built specifically for people with permanent limitations.
Right, like a compliance checklist that gets bolted on at the very end. But Reidenhag's core thesis is that by treating accessibility as an exception, we completely miss the point.
Because it's not just about edge cases.
Not at all. Most of the challenges accessibility addresses aren't edge cases in the slightest. They are literally about how work is actually done in everyday situations.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand why that bolt-on approach fails, we have to look at this myth of the ideal user versus the messy reality.
Oh, the mythical ideal user. Product teams love to design for this person.
They really do. It's like digital systems are always designed for this assumed state where the user is perfectly focused, totally rested, and sitting in a dead quiet room.
With perfect diffuse lighting, just staring intently at a high-res monitor.
Yeah, the stock photo user. The one sitting in a sunlit minimalist cafe, smiling blankly at a laptop with a pristine latte right next to them.
Right. But the reality, especially when you look at professional and industrial contexts, is so far from that.
Like people working in warehouses or hospitals.
Exactly. Users in those environments are under severe time pressure. They are multitasking, constantly switching contexts. They're working in noisy environments with terrible fluorescent lighting.
Or they're out in the field.
Yeah, they're fatigued, stressed, and just constantly fielding interruptions from colleagues. So accessibility isn't about creating alternative experiences for a tiny minority.
It's about reducing friction when conditions just aren't perfect.
Mm.
It's like designing a car's dashboard, assuming the driver is always on a perfectly paved, totally empty road on a sunny day.
You might make the buttons tiny and the text incredibly subtle, thinking, they have all the time in the world to appreciate the aesthetic.
Right. But wait, let me play devil's advocate here. Does designing for the worst-case scenario risk making the system really clunky for someone who actually is sitting quietly at their desk?
That's the classic pushback, right? But the source material addresses this perfectly. Accessibility takes these chaotic situations into account, not by adding clunky special modes, but by universally reducing friction.
So it actually helps everyone.
Exactly. It proves that the so-called worst-case scenario is actually just the normal scenario. Think about closed captioning originally for the deaf community, but now everyone uses it in a noisy sports bar.
Oh, totally. Which brings us to this idea of the universality of temporary limitations. Because those messy environments actually create limitations within all of us, right?
They do. The environment directly alters our capabilities. The source points out that temporary limitations are just a regular, unavoidable part of everyday life.
Like when loud noises make audio signals completely impossible to hear.
Right, or how bright sunlight ruins your screen contrast, or how being tired just makes complex information so hard to interpret.
And stress leads to mistakes. Accessibility actually takes these realities seriously.
It does. Good design choices, like having a clear visual hierarchy, sufficient contrast, clear feedback, and predictable behavior, they help users maintain orientation when their attention is compromised.
And everyone listening to this knows that exact panic,
Yeah.
trying to read a glaring smartphone screen in bright sunlight when you're already stressed and running late.
You're like twisting your whole body to cast a shadow just to read an email.
It's the worst.
What's fascinating here is how the source completely redefines who accessibility is for. It is not designed for a small, marginalized group.
No, it's designed for the reality of being human in a chaotic world.
Exactly. And that physical chaos, the noise, the glare, it actually creates a massive internal burden, which the source calls cognitive load.
Yes, cognitive load. This is the hidden tax of poor usability. It's basically the mental effort required to understand a system.
Right, the raw brain power you need just to keep track of different states or interpret weird feedback or handle mistakes.
High cognitive load makes users so much slower. It increases error rates and makes systems just exhausting to use.
Because you're requiring constant vigilance from the user just to avoid messing something up. Accessibility lowers that mental effort by making information clearer and interactions more consistent.
I always think of cognitive load like a computer's RAM. Like if an app is using 90% of your mental RAM just to navigate the nested menus, you only have 10% left to actually do your job.
That is a perfect analogy. You just don't have the processing power left for the actual task.
But let me push back again. Doesn't making things quote-unquote easier to understand just mean we're dumbing down complex professional tools? Like an engineer might need that complexity.
People assume that, but the source refutes it completely. Lowering cognitive load is not about dumbing things down. It is strictly about clarity.
So the complexity of the task remains, but the tool gets out of the way.
Exactly. When mental effort drops, all users benefit because they can focus entirely on the task itself, rather than wrestling with a confusing interface.
Because if they are exhausted from wrestling with the interface, they make mistakes. Which transitions us from just user comfort to the really hard business case here.
Right. We're talking about error prevention in high-stakes professional systems. Accessibility principles are inherent linked to stopping mistakes.
Because clear labels, unambiguous states, and highly visible feedback literally stop mistakes before they even happen.
And if a mistake does happen, because, human good guidance helps the user fix it safely and quickly.
In professional systems where mistakes are super risky or cost a lot of money, accessibility isn't some nice-to-have adaptation.
No, it is fundamentally about reliability. A good system communicates clearly and behaves consistently.
It explains what is happening and shows the exact next logical step. Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Think about this the next time you, the listener, are using a complex software tool for work. If you make a costly error, it might not actually be your fault.
It's usually labeled as human error, right?
Exactly. But it might actually be a failure of the system's accessibility. The system demanded more cognitive load than you had available.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this completely changes accessibility from a compliance checklist item into a core pillar of operational safety and efficiency for literally any business.
It really does. It's risk management. And what's wild is that having explored all this critical importance, we have to look at what success actually looks like.
And paradoxically, the ultimate success of accessibility is that it goes entirely unnoticed.
It's totally invisible. Good accessibility rarely announces its presence, and it requires zero special features to be turned on.
Yeah, you don't click a button that says turn on good design. It is just quietly built into how the system communicates and supports you.
When it's present, systems just feel calmer. They're easier to trust and way less mentally demanding.
But when it's missing, oh man, users notice immediately, even if they can't quite articulate exactly why they hate the software.
They just know it's frustrating. It's like a good referee in a sports game. If they're doing a great job, you completely forget they are even there. You're just watching the game.
But the second they blow a call, they're the only thing you notice.
Exactly. Accessibility shouldn't be a special requirement. It is just an obvious part of good design based on how people actually think and act.
Breidenhegg's article really drives this home. By designing for our worst, most distracted and stressed moments, we build digital infrastructure that feels trustworthy and robust for everyone.
So what does this all mean? Let's wrap up our journey today. We've moved far away from viewing accessibility as some edge case feature for a small minority.
Right, it's not just a box to check anymore.
No, we have to recognize it as a crucial buffer against the messy, noisy, high-stress reality we all actually operate in.
It protects us from our own temporary limitations.
It does. It means next time you find an app incredibly frustrating to use when you're tired, you know exactly what design principle they skipped. It's not you, it's the design.
And before we go, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over on your own.
Go for it.
Consider the physical spaces you navigate daily. Your office, your local grocery store, the dashboard of your car.
The physical world, yeah?
How much of the physical world is currently suffering from a high cognitive load that we just accept as normal?
Oh, wow. That's a great point.
And how might applying these digital accessibility principles completely change the way we design our physical reality?
That is something to think about next time you're stuck navigating a confusing airport or a terrible parking lot. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. Keep looking at the world through this new lens, and we'll see you next time.